I'm just referring to my notes for a moment. I'm going to be doing that a lot, so don't mind me. The strengths of that is not only the variety, but each one of those characters can have a complete story arc. Thank you. A complete story arc of their own, where they start out ignorant in some ways, with not a full understanding of themselves, not a full understanding of the world around them, and over the course of the story, they can have what we call a story arc, where they start out at the beginning, they get themselves into trouble, they get out of that trouble, and in so doing, they learn something about themselves, about the world around them, and become a better person. And when you have a few controlled point of view characters, you can merge those together, those stories together, and weave them into an overall story. The weaknesses of this is that it becomes much more complex to do that. When you have just one character and just one story arc, you have a simpler story, an easier story to follow, an easier story to read. And as Stephen was saying, that kind of simpler story can be more popular in a lot of ways because it's an easier, more comfortable feel. And the danger of having multiple point of view characters is that your story can grow too complex and get a little out of control. We've seen that with George R.R. Martin, with Robert Jordan, where they get so enamored in bringing in new point of view characters that it becomes unwieldy. There's so many characters that there's no way to tie up all of those stories at once, and you end up doing book after book after book. This is something that I've struggled with a little bit. My first book had 3 point of view characters, and with that I was able to have a very tight story. I knew where each arc would go and how it would come together in the end, and have the 3 of them be a cohesive unit by the end of the book. In my second book, I added a number of point of view characters so that I had 8 point of view characters. This, I think, stretched my feeble mind about as much as it could go. I think that I was able to, by moving some of the original characters out of the spotlight and new characters into the spotlight, I was able to do it with that many characters, but I learned a very valuable lesson, is that the more characters you have, the more difficult it gets, and you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to have so many characters that your story loses cohesion, because that cohesion and that tightness is what makes a story compelling. And the more characters you have, the danger is that the story can become less and less compelling. The third way to tell the story is to just have a narrator who knows everything and can get into the heads of every single character in the book. This was a storytelling style that was very popular a long time ago and has kind of fallen out of vogue because it's less personal. When you're jumping into the head of every single character in the book, you can't really have a complete story arc for all of those characters, and it becomes less personal. Authors like, I find some of the more popular authors today are the ones that get really close to their point of view characters, like Joe Abercrombie, as Stephen mentioned before, is a master of putting you right in the head of your character. You feel what they feel. When they're hungry, you feel hungry. That, when they're about to get into a fight and they feel sick and they feel tired and they have to go to the bathroom, like, he feeds you that steady stream of information that all of us have to go through in our daily lives, and we kind of push it to the side to do things, but it's still there. And that level of intimacy with a character is what I think can really pull a reader into a story and make them feel that they're not just watching it, but that they're living it themselves. When you have what we call an omniscient view, where the narrator knows everything and sees everything, you don't have that kind of really close, intimate relationship with your character. Excuse me. Now, once you have, once you've decided which of those methods you want to use for your story, there's a few things that I feel you need to think about for your characters before you, right at the beginning, before you start moving ahead, which is the purpose of the point of view character is to introduce the story and teach the reader what they need to know about your story. Now, if you're writing science fiction and fantasy, there's usually a lot you need to teach the reader. You need to explain the world that the story is taking place in, whether it's our world or a different one. You need to explain what's unique about that world. You need to explain how the magic works, if there's magic. You need to explain how the technology works, if your story is based on technology. All of these things come through your point of view character. And the best way to do that is to have your character be ignorant in some way, or be innocent in some way. This is why you have the common beginning to a fantasy story where the main character starts out on a farm as a farmer. I do that myself in Painted Man. The main character grows up on a farm, and I did that purposely, both because it's an accepted fantasy trope and because it works. It's done for a reason, and that reason is when that character grows up in a certain level of isolation and doesn't understand the world around them, when they finally leave the farm, they have to learn all about the world around them. They have to learn what the monsters in the woods are. They have to learn how the magic works. They have to learn how people behave, you know, at the royal court. Wherever they go, they need to learn these things. And as the character learns them, the reader learns them. This is a much more direct way of feeding information to your reader than just writing a long lump of indigestible text about how the court works or how the monsters, you know, what the monsters are like. When the reader has to experience that through the eyes of somebody who's experiencing it themselves, it's much more compelling than if you just tell someone, this is how the magic works, this is how the monsters are, this is this, this is that. So while you don't have to start your character on a farm, the idea of having them be someone who's grown up in isolation or who has grown up separate from the world that you want to introduce your reader to is a helpful tool to do that. It's not the only way to do it, but it's an easy way to help feed information that way. You have things like, you know, this is why you have characters who grow up and suddenly realize, oh, I'm royalty and I didn't know it because, you know, my father was secretly the king and no one told me. And that's the reason those stories work is because A, we all like to dream that we're somebody special and suddenly we're going to wake up one day and realize that, oh, there's this whole world that was waiting for me and I didn't realize that. But also because you get to, you know, as the peasant boy becomes a prince and has to learn courtly manners and has to learn how to behave and has to learn to negotiate the politics of their world, you can explain all of those politics to your reader, you can explain all of those things to your reader, and that vehicle is a very powerful one. And so while sometimes there's the temptation to have your main character be someone who's already established, who already knows what they need to know, that makes it much more difficult to share that information with your reader.